Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next episode of Corporate Box. Today, we are going to talk about the business of sports. How do you make a career in that? What are the job options? Which are the companies that you need to apply for in this business? And joining me again today is Dhruv Mullick. Hello, Dhruv, and what's the topic for today for us?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be back in the corporate box. This is one of my favorite areas of discussion because it's the first thing people want to know. How do I get into the business? Which company do I join? What are the roles available?
How much
And
do you get paid?
how much you get paid? And obviously, Akhil, this becomes a great discussion at the end of every IPL auction because people see these massive multi-crore contracts and now want to start working with cricketers, representing cricketers, managing them. However, they sometimes are not put in the right direction in terms of what is the job description, what are the roles available. And the easiest thing that we explain to them here is anything you do with representing a professional athlete or a professional cricketer is your commercial off-field supplementary income.
We'll get on to that. I just wanted to start with doing like a simple breakup of what are the different aspects
Yes.
that are involved in the business of sports. Okay, so we'll start with the first one. We'll start with athlete management.
Athlete management, athlete representation.
So athlete management is essentially when you start to work with a cricketer or a sports person
Yes.
and you manage all his commercial interests off the field.
Supplementary income.
Off the field. That's what we reiterated in our last episode,
Correct.
specifically in India, correct? So what does an athlete management role entail, Dhruv? If you can just give a gist, you've done it with some of the biggest names in the Indian sports business.
Yeah.
So what does a role entail? How does one get into that?
Right. So specifically here on the commercial aspects of athlete management or representation, as you rightly said, the job description will entail building a commercial and a brand portfolio of the professional athlete or the professional cricketer. That would involve steps of identifying core categories of sponsorship, core categories.
So I'll break that. So that is that what he means by that is a core category is something like a sportswear for any sports person. So
Yeah.
brands like a Nike, a Reebok, and Adidas, correct?
The first thing a professional athlete needs is a sports brand. Because that's the equipment that he plays with, that's the shoes that he or she runs in, the training gear that they wear. And of course, the sports brand space has been globally and for many years in India dominated by the big three, Nike, Puma, and Adidas. There are
Sure.
now different independent labels. So that becomes one. For a cricketer in India, your equipment becomes a core category. Your SG and your SS, your bat brands, your equipment brand.
Right.
And then, another core category could be your nutritional brands, because for a professional athlete, that becomes one. So once you identify these core categories around a cricketer or a pro athlete, it involves a very sales focused role, a sponsorship monetization role, and then managing the sponsors, handling their entitlements, handling the kind of commitments an athlete has to give to a sponsor. So in a nutshell, very, very briefly, that would be how I'd describe the role.
Nice. So I wanted to just take you back and like when we've started seeing and observing the industry, how this athlete management role has evolved
Yes.
from mid 90s when Mark Mascarenhas was probably the biggest
You
name.
remember the famous picture where he's hugging Sachin Tendulkar in Sharjah?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I still have that. I had that on my wall for a few years because that was the first time the Indian market actually saw how you represent a professional athlete, and it was dominated by cricketers for many years because cricketers hold a different
Correct.
sphere as professional athletes in India. And that entire segment on how Mark Mascarenhas created a commercial strategy around Sachin Tendulkar, identified, as we said, core categories and then consumer brand categories, categories that were very important to the Indian consumer. And Sachin Tendulkar for many years was the face of that aspect of the business in India.
Absolutely. I mean, there were athletes like a Kapil Dev or a
Yes.
Farooq Engineer, if you
Yes,
remember, in the
before
early
that,
70s.
he was the first cricketer to endorse Brill
Brill
Cream.
Cream.
Yeah.
Then there was obviously Sunil Gavaskar, who
Yes.
came in and he started getting some endorsements, and he
Yes.
started monetizing his own brand value. But yes, Sachin and Mark Mascarena's partnership was like the path
That
breaker,
was the first, I would say, as you rightly said, part breaking from a structured commercial
structured commercial
standpoint.
standpoint.
And of course, Mark Mascarenhas' company did many things from television rights, which we'll probably elaborate
We'll
on
elaborate on.
in
Yeah,
different
absolutely.
episodes. But that was the first time people woke up to the professional side of athlete management and athlete representation.
Absolutely perfect. So at that time, the model was such that where you had an agency like a Worldtel, which was an international agency, who was managing multiple athletes, and they were trying their best to monetize those athletes basis their performance, basis their popularity in the cricketing or the sporting world. Right? Uh, we'll just like to make some honorable mentions of other companies who were doing some good business at that time. Percept, who had a lot of cricketers signed on with them. They did some huge deals, and they were in the market for a very, very long time handling cricketers. Collage Sports,
Yeah, Latika Kaneja and Virender
Sehwag,
Sehwag.
that relationship was very strong at that time, and they were doing some good work with a lot of big brands. There was TCM, 21st Century Media.
Yeah, Rahul Dravid.
Rahul Dravid. For the longest time, I remember Dravid was working with them very closely, and they were a dominant player at that time in the market. Uh, but after a point of time, there was a little change that happened in this athlete management kind of a working model, isn't it?
Yeah, it did.
After IPL specifically,
The IPL was the disruptor, and we touched on this in our last episode as well. Is that prior to the IPL, the monetizable value of an Indian professional cricketer was his off-field supplementary income. Your primary income at the time was not very high. I mean, you didn't get paid a lot of money to play for India. There were no professional contracts. There were no BCCI central contracts. So, basis, as you rightly said, performing well for India, whether you were, like I said, from Sunil Gavaskar to Kapil Dev and then moving it along to Sachin Tendulkar, you monetized your off-field brand. That was by brand endorsements, television commercials, print media, and now it's obviously evolved into aspects of digital monetization. But that was the core, the crux of the business.
So let's talk about what changed after IPL. After IPL, the players got income that they could also have focus on in terms of a big income that they could generate from playing cricket.
Yes.
They had a 2-month contract window. They were getting quite a good amount of money to play cricket. So obviously there were still agencies at that time, Dhruv, who were managing multiple athletes.
Yes.
Somebody like a Globo Sport, a Cornerstone, who had a lot of cricketers working with them, a lot of sports persons actually.
They were managing their off-field
They
portfolio.
were managing their off-field portfolios, and not just cricketers; it were non-cricketers
Non-cricket
also.
athletes as well.
So until a point of time, MS Dhoni, I think, was the first one who decided to part ways with a bigger agency, start his own model.
That's correct.
So now, if you can elaborate on how does this work? What happens when a cricketer goes and starts his own business model separately?
Yeah, so the IPL was the big disruptor in that element because that was the first time a cricketer was getting paid for his on-field services. He was getting a professional contract. And over the years, till about from 2008 to 2011, as those salaries increased, the first wing of IPL retentions in 2010-11, cricketers started to understand that a higher percentage of our income is now our primary. So it moved back from supplementary to primary. These are very important terms for young people entering the industry. Whenever you devise a commercial strategy around a professional cricketer or a professional athlete, the first thing I tell people is, what is your primary income? What's your supplementary income? And post the IPL, cricketers understood the growth of their primary income. So their supplementary income, they decided to now take it into their own hands.
Why is that? Why is that?
For two reasons. One, because the market had changed. Post Sachin Tendulkar and post MS Dhoni and Virat Kohli, the market started to decrease for a lot of other cricketers. So they realized that now it makes sense identifying smaller teams to work on their brand, identifying certain categories that they want to monetize. And while their IPL contracts were starting to increase, when were the first BCCI central contracts? I think 2017.
No, earlier, much earlier.
Earlier than that?
Maybe 2000. 2012.
But they weren't as high.
They were not as structured and they
As
were not as
structured,
high.
yeah. I think the Lodha committee were the ones that really structured those. So I think then cricketers realized that we have a fixed source of income in our primary salary, whether through a BCCI contract, whether through an IPL contract. Let's now look at our supplementary side of the income. Let's work with smaller teams. We don't need to work with, say, a bigger management company that has a bunch of cricketers on the roster. Let's now identify
Maybe personal attention.
Personal attention and personalized strategies, Akhil, because if you have somebody handling your personal commercial portfolio, they can have 100% focus on that. And the biggest disruptor here was actually Yuvraj Singh, because he was a Globosport athlete at the time. He decided to move independent. Right. And he helped set up, a company with a long-term agent, and that led to the birth of Cornerstone. Yeah. Right? MS Dhoni, as you rightly said, around the same time moved out of Game Plan, and he set up his own company, RT Sports. Yeah. And it's quite interesting, Akhil, that sitting today in 2024, that is still a preferred model for a lot of cricketers. I devised a self-representation model for a cricketer for 5 years. Some very big names in the industry today. Shubman Gill is independent. He works with an independent team. Rishabh Pant has gone independent with a small boutique setup. So while the big agencies exist, and we'll get into the companies because again, this is a segment on helping people identify companies to work for. But we have moved to this independent boutique representation as well.
So typically when a cricketer works with a bigger agency, whatever income that he gets off the field, he imparts a percentage of that back to the agency.
Of course.
Correct? Yes. When he hires his own team, he makes his own setup. Yes. He actually pays some kind of a salary to all of them. They are on a salary payroll with them and they manage his business like they would manage any other business. Is that correct?
You're correct. And with some cricketers today, look, there's no one size fits all.
Absolutely.
But again, yes, but what has happened now is that because their IPL salaries are extremely high, and those are salaries that are paid into your personal name. It's a personal contract between the cricketer and the IPL team, the cricketer and the BCCI. The tax implication is huge because you fall into the highest category of your income tax in India. So with their off-field supplementary income, they've looked to set up entities. So have their own LLP, have their own private entity where they can receive their sponsorship income, and that also from a taxation point of view is more efficient. And number two, they get to hire their team of people and pay them, as you rightly said, a salary or a contracted fee. And the cricketer is able to identify areas of expertise. So they can hire a social media manager, a PR manager, a fashion stylist, someone to look after their personal appearances and events.
Legal, obviously.
Hiring a lawyer, hiring a chartered accountant. That's one of the first things that I did when I set up this representation model for a cricketer, Mayank Agarwal. The first person I did is we hire an independent legal team. We have an independent chartered accountant. So it handles all these aspects. And that is how I would say differentiate your self-representation model. When it's an agency model, the agency will do everything, as you rightly said, for a success commission or a success fee.
Perfect. So that is a beautiful gist of how an athlete management role works. We'll move on to the next one, which is probably the biggest chunk of the business that happens in India, which is sponsorship sales. Apart from the media rights, the broadcast rights, sponsorship is the single biggest chunk that happens, the business happens in India. Whether we like it or not, IPL takes the lion's share of sponsorship business in India. So let's try and explain what exactly does a role entail in a sponsorship work in India. What are the kind of deals that happen and what is a person's or anybody's job to how does he work or make that sponsorship happen? How do you get a job like that?
So when you're entering the industry, like if it's your first job out of college, your first role is just your basic cold calling. It's making a lot of Excel sheets, doing a lot of research. One of the first companies that I worked with, Go Sports, this was back in 2005-06 when it wasn't a CSR foundation. It started off as a private company. And one of my first roles was to keep making Excel sheets on the largest spenders in Indian sports, the largest sponsors.
And how did you do that?
Just internet research.
Just Google.
Yeah, primary research on the internet, just looking at the various companies. The other job would be obviously looking at a lot of the professional athletes. Again, it was dominated by professional cricketers. So, who are the brands that Sachin Tendulkar endorses? Who are the brands that Dravid endorses? Later on, MS Dhoni, Virat Kohli, making that entire list. Then understanding how do you reach the right marketing manager or the sales manager or the sponsorship manager within those brands.
Understood. So that's the first role, like you mentioned.
Yes.
So then what happens? What do you do for to get a sponsorship for what is the kind of sponsorships that exist in India? One is like a team sponsorship, which is your Indian team, Indian cricket team, Indian football team, Indian hockey team, whichever national teams that they play. Then there are the leagues that happen.
The leagues that happen and the franchises.
The franchises.
Again,
which
here,
happen.
this is where IPL was a great disruptor because previously you only could sell one or two sponsorships for the Indian national team. You'd have Nike as a kitting partner, you'd have a central sponsor like Sahara for a while, ITC Wills for a while, and what's Dream 11 today. But the IPL gave you 10 different companies.
And the other leagues.
The other leagues, as they later evolved post the start of the IPL, where you could sell inventory for a team, logos on a kit, logos on a sleeve. So that became a sponsorship aspect. So either you could have sponsors for a team or sponsors for an individual athlete. That's how I would say the sponsorship model would work.
Perfect. I remember the first deal that I actually got onto the table was for Rohit Sharma. We'd got one petroleum company who had come and wanted to sponsor Rohit Sharma. Unfortunately, he was already working for Indian Oil. So that deal did not go through. So everything was agreed. And at the last minute, his agent had realized that he's working for Indian Oil. So he couldn't because it was a category conflict. But that is always a fond memory for me. I'll always remember getting the first deal. He had not played international cricket at that time. So it was a very early spot. But okay, so this is a big aspect of sponsorship. Like you mentioned, franchisees after the IPL had started, that became a huge opportunity.
More opportunities to sell because see, at the end of the day, representing an athlete or a cricketer, as I said, there are core categories. Not every athlete or cricketer is as marketable. There is a massive difference, especially in today's modern digital context, between marketability and ability. So your ability as a professional athlete or a professional cricketer could be phenomenal, but your marketing aspects, your marketing attributes, your intangibles always differ.
So once you identify sponsors, once you identify these are the categories that I want to go and get a sponsor for, say, a team like a Royal Challengers Bangalore. Okay, so then what happens? Then you go and meet the team, the brand team. You tell them that this is the kind of association that you will get associating with our team. And then you manage that relationship.
Of course. So either now again, from a job perspective, if you're working in a sales team of an IPL franchise, or if you're working for any of these agencies we spoke about, your job in the market when you're sourcing brands, when you're talking to sponsors, is identifying sponsorship opportunities. So if you were a sponsor, say you're a marketing head of a particular consumer brand, and I'm working either for an independent cricketer or I'm working for a sponsorship agency, my job would be to come to you and present sponsorship opportunities to you. So I would say, this is a particular cricketer, this is it. Then we would discuss how a contract would work in terms of entitlements. Entitlements for an individual athlete differ. They have to provide a certain number of days, certain number of social media posts, certain number of, content opportunities that they would create for the brand. A team sponsorship is a little different, where we would talk about, as we said, logo positions, getting access to team players, getting access to 3 players in a certain brand communication. So those are the nitty-gritties of how you would structure it.
We love talking about this subject, so we can go on and on, but we'll cover PR and social media next in terms of business opportunities or job opportunities for people. This is probably the one which offers the largest opportunities for people to come and start taking jobs. So can you tell us what happens in a PR and a social media role in the sports business?
Yeah, so sports PR again is something that the first time I kind of worked in sports PR is when, you remember, I had set up an agency and I represented hockey players prior to the 2012 Olympics. Now, as we said, for a lot of other professional athletes at the time, non-cricket athletes, there were not abundant sponsorship and commercial opportunities.
It was very tough.
It is. So what's the work you could do for your athlete is uplift their PR profile. try and get them in as many magazine shoots, try and get them in as many
Basically, make them visible.
yeah, their PR visibility. So again, that would involve devising a strategy of offline media, looking at some very good magazines. This I'm talking prior to the Instagram era. I'm talking around 2011. Yeah, 2011, 12. So identifying a lot of good magazines and providing a PR strategy where the athlete sees that kind of visibility in the media space, which will hopefully lead to commercial opportunities. Of course, their on-field performance determines a lot of that, but that becomes now that's evolved so much now into post 2020 where Instagram and the digital space has almost been the next, you could say, PR centric activity for professional athletes. Today, the first point of reference when we want to hear about a professional athlete in India, particularly a non-cricket athlete, is we look at their Instagram profiles. It has become the biggest brand.
It's like a currency, right?
It is, and in established markets like the US, it's gone to another level with name, image, and likeness for college athletes, which is again a discussion for a separate episode altogether. But Instagram has taken that activity. So, from a job perspective, a lot of digital agencies exist in India today where you come on and you manage the digital profile of the athlete.
So, with the digital profile, you mean the social media handles of a player.
Yes.
So, say a Shubman Gill who has a lot of millions of followers.
Yeah.
So, somebody, one person or a team will be managing what he posts on his Instagram, what he posts on his Twitter or X, what he posts on his Facebook,
Correct.
What he's going to talk about, correct?
And from a commercial standpoint, I would say mainly Instagram, because that's a platform where it's the highest monetizable platform, which is now moving to YouTube and to podcasts. We're seeing that a lot with professional athletes in the US, and it hasn't come to India in a very big way because athletes have restrictions, particularly cricketers, on content monetization with their contracts, especially with YouTube. But yes, so what a team would do is, while they would strategize the kind of content they put out, the kind of fashion content or the kind of, brand imagery content they'd put out, they also look at it as a very dedicated commercial platform to monetize. So a lot of brands today, Akhil, when they sign an athlete or a team, if they were to pay X as a sponsorship fee, they have to spend 3 or 4x to activate the sponsorship, either through offline activations, online, your above the line activations, your below the line activations. So Instagram has given them the opportunity where their player themselves is a media channel, so they can utilize the player's platform for brand marketing. So provide the player a mobile telephone, and they would do a couple of posts on that, create content around that. Nice. So that has become something that has changed a lot also post-COVID, because there was lesser access to players.
Online access.
So they had to monetize a lot through Instagram.
I remember you mentioned pre-Instagram, and when we had done a very nice campaign and very proud campaign in Puma, hashtag Love 12 with Yuvraj Singh.
That was a Twitter campaign, yeah. That was purely, X at the time, I know.
So there was no, Instagram was not as huge as that time. So we had used Yuvraj Singh, like you mentioned, how brands use a cricketer or athlete, his image on social media. Correct. Okay, so what kind of requirements do people have to get into a job like this? You basically have to be very good in knowing what is a social media, how the social media works.
The social media aspect. I mean, a lot of the growth of social media, I was probably late to the party on that, because again, a lot of us, a majority of our career was spent in doing traditional media, doing PR activities. So a lot of the younger people today are very savvy on Instagram. They understand content creation and they understand the content creator aspect. And athletes today, especially cricketers in India, are becoming content creators themselves. They're becoming media channels themselves. So from a job standpoint, somebody representing this aspect of a cricketer has to understand messaging. What are areas that the cricketer likes? Do they like travel? Do they like food? Do they have great commitments to either family or to fashion or to their own training? Yeah, various trends. And once that content is put out, invariably brands would reach out to them. Brands would notice it, or they would reach out to brands and say,
Perfect.
how do we monetize the aspect?
You worked closely with Shikhar Dhawan many years ago. At that time, he was not on social media, if you remember.
No, so Shikhar Dhawan used to be reluctant to be
On social
on
media,
social
and
media.
that is a rare thing.
It was a
When
rare
he
thing,
was
but I
playing
think
active cricket at that time.
yeah, and now he's monetizing his Instagram probably better than any cricketer. Look, there are again levels to this.
There are
If you
levels to
are
this.
as great as a Virat Kohli, your own Instagram channel itself now is an advertising medium because of the reach that it has, and you can command a very high fee for it. So someone like a Virat Kohli doesn't have to create content, right? His brilliance on the field leads to the commercial brands coming to him, whether to monetize him through traditional media or through Instagram. A lot of other cricketers, I would say, spend a lot more time and effort in creating content, right? Because they need to, with the aim of monetizing.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to give that Shikhar example, saying that this is how players have evolved over the years. I remember with one of the shoots that we had done with him, Meta had come to meet him and were explaining to him about how you can start your Facebook channel and how can Facebook handle and how you can start your Instagram. And now when you look at him, he's almost like a content creator, right? He's cracked the algorithm. He knows what people want to see, so he keeps posting that. So that's the example I just wanted to throw in.
It is, and again, there's so many interesting debates about this now because, as you say, this has evolved to another level in markets like the US, where today college athletes are becoming content creators.
Yeah, and Ashwin is probably Ravichandran Ashwin is trying to.
And he's moved to the next phase with YouTube, which is going to be the next disruptor after Instagram.
I wanted to quickly last capture the another big chunk. Yes, event management, like you said. You've seen how events have evolved. Sporting events have evolved in India over, like, say, 15 years. We were all hoping the Commonwealth Games would do that in 2010 when there was a lot of spend happening in India. Obviously, IPL is the big chunk.
IPL created it was the first time, so Bangalore-based DNA were one of the primary prominent companies in event management and event execution.
I think Procam did that with the marathon.
Procam did that with the marathon, exactly.
They envisaged an event that they could capture as an IP and then build on it. So for me, Procam was always the company which started with the
Procam,
marathons.
yeah. DNA now have taken it to
DNA have
another
taken
level.
it to execution of events has been outstanding with the DNA. The amount of work that they get. There are a lot of other agents.
Small boutique companies doing activations because there are so many different things even for a brand. You can execute a sporting property. One of the first events I worked on was something when I worked for Globosport called the Apollo Tires Talent Hunt.
The tennis.
Yes, where Mahesh Bhupathi had
great
done
idea.
a 4-city property where he would get he would run a talent camp, and that was the first time you had a brand like Apollo Tires integrating with a sports management company like Globosport with the aim of finding a talented athlete. That was something which was very exciting.
There were a couple of award ceremonies. Percept, I think, had tried to create a lot of glamour with getting movie stars and cricketers together with awards. There was PMG who tried that with their Castrol award, with their awards.
Yeah. I worked on the Castrol Awards that took place in Pakistan in 2008.
Nice.
That was very interesting. The SIAT Awards has been a PMG property for many years.
It's lasted for
I've
many
worked on a
years.
couple of those, and so PMG were also a pioneer in these specific events. And to explain to people who want to get into the business, event execution is also a great way to learn the ropes in the sports business.
And I think a lot of interns
A lot of freelancers get into
the
that.
opportunities are more in this event space because all IPL teams, all the franchisees, the central IPL teams, they all need people to work on ground execution.
They hire a lot of freelancers every time there's a tournament, there's a game. Even when there's an India match in a city like Bangalore or Bombay, the number of the event execution teams would hire volunteers. They would hire. So I think it's a good way that we've broken this into 4 concise roles. Managing the athlete, representing the athlete, sponsorship sales, PR and digital, and then finally events. I mean, there are lots more roles we can talk about, but I think breaking them into these four is quite helpful.
Those are the crux. Obviously, if there are more and more information that you need about certain aspects of sports management, do write to us, comment on our YouTube channel. We'll be happy to talk and discuss that. We've probably worked on a lot of other aspects also that we can talk about here. But for now, these are the four key aspects of the sports business. We've mentioned some companies here. We'll get into that and we'll list a few others also specifically in that specific genre of sports business. How about we now talk about a few companies who are excelling or who are doing well in these key aspects?
Correct.
Obviously, there are going to be companies who are doing all the four aspects.
Yes.
That's like a all-rounder company.
Yeah.
But let's go one by one and let's say talk about some key companies who are existing right now and who people can
This is
target.
extremely important because it's very difficult for one particular agency or company to have expertise in these four areas. In representing the cricketer or the athlete, in executing events, in doing sponsorship sales, and doing PR and digital management. Two companies that, as you said, that are all-rounder companies in the sports business in India are Reliance Rise and GSW. Only because, look, they're multi-billion-dollar corporations and their sports businesses are very evolved across these four areas, maybe many other areas going forward. But for someone entering the business, I would say it's always good to identify one area that you want to work in and then identify certain companies in that particular area.
Which are the companies which are doing well right now in athlete management in India?
A lot of the good companies today, Baseline Ventures is one, iOS based in Delhi is another company, Meraki Sports based in Bangalore. And what these companies would do is that they would either sign a cricketer, sign a non-cricket athlete, and handle their off-field commercial portfolio. So if you're looking to join any of these companies, your job would purely entail, as I said, identifying core categories of sponsorship, identifying categories that the athlete or the cricketer needs, and handling a very sales-focused role around that athlete.
Or a servicing focused role?
Servicing focused role. So I would say between Reliance Rise, JSW Sports, Baseline, Meraki, iOS, right?
Yes,
Based in Delhi
iOS.
is one. They represent a lot of non-cricket athletes. Dharma Cornerstone is another example. And
Collective.
the Artist Collective, yes, who are focusing a lot more on the digital content side. So these are the companies that exist currently in the industry. Perfect. And it feels years since we were just talking about Mark Mascarenhas and Percept and WorldTel. Wow, which we've seen it over the past 15 years. This has changed quite a lot.
Yeah,
And if people want to write in to reach out to a specific company, please get in touch, and we'll probably be able to try our best to point you in the right direction on that aspect.
Okay, so now let's get to the sponsorship part, Dhruv. That is the major chunk of the business in India. Which are the companies that come to your mind when I talk about sponsorship?
The three big ones here. Every IPL, you'll have Reliance Rise, JSW, and ITW based out of Bangalore mentioning the central sponsorship deals they've done or deals for particular IPL teams or ISL teams in the Football League. These involve team sponsorships. They also do a lot of, as you said, some companies do individual athlete sponsorships, but these companies come to mind. They do a great amount of sponsorship deals. Reliance with their central partnerships, which they've done with Geo and with Dream 11. They've done an exceptional job in that front. ITW did a very good job when they had Herbalife as one of the central sponsors of the IPL, maybe last season or season before. So those are the commercial agencies. You also have media agencies. Yeah.
So the media agencies again are an important chunk here because, like I mentioned, for a sponsorship to go through, the brand needs to be able to trust the agency who he's working with. Usually, a lot of media agencies also advise a brand on which other opportunate sponsorships to go after.
And you mean agencies like Group M, Dentsu?
Yes, the media buying agencies. Group M has a very successful sports marketing division who advise a lot of their clients, and with Group M you have access to a lot of clients.
They do the annual report as well.
They do an annual report which we are going to discuss here once. But yes, Group M, Dentsu are the media partners who have specialized sports divisions who advise on sponsorships, and they do a lot of business. They work very closely with the right holders also. So they work very closely with the cricket associations. They work very closely with the football associations, with hockey associations, with broadcasters also to get them deals. So they are a very important chunk here.
And for someone wanting to enter the business, joining a lot of these companies, I get asked this a lot. I feel this is a difficult job to do if you're just starting out. So it helps if you're in a smaller company. It can also be useful. One thing that really helped me in my career is that when I worked for PMG, there was focused areas. So I could focus on sponsorships for, say, a particular event. I could focus on sponsorships for some kind of content, syndicated content and things like that. So the job would entail a lot of cold calling, a lot of understanding how a sponsorship works, and then you kind of get to it. So it's not easy to jump into right away.
Not easy.
But and it takes a lot of time. The sponsorship market is difficult, but again, it's a great aspect if you wish to. I mean, if job opportunities open up in the bigger companies like JSW and Reliance, jump at them. But I think a good way to learn is working through the smaller companies and coming.
So we've mentioned some of the names here who are operating at a large scale, but there are some good players when we talk about the names which are there in the business. I mean, people like a Nitin Khanna who've worked at Voltel and then at WSG. He's doing some good work. He's managed to have clients like MRF working with him for a very long time. Somebody like a Vinod Naidu who's working on NU Start, who's been doing a lot of IPL deals. He's working with a lot of big cricketers in the past.
Correct. And that was part of the trend from big agency to self-representation, where you form a smaller boutique agency and you offer, what's the correct word to use here? Personalized services. So you create a personalized offering, something I had done with Mayank for 5 years. And like I said, Shubman Gill today, Rishabh Pant today, we'll try and get their representatives on another episode because they're doing some very good work as well here.
So we'll have a lot more names coming up.
Yeah.
Then we'll have quickly talk about the social media and digital agencies and also the event companies. Like mention those names. Which are the names that come to your mind?
DNA for events, as you rightly said, Procam for events, and these companies are always recruiting. I know DNA, every time there's an ISL football game or there's IPL cricket, there are always freelancers they're looking for, people just finishing college. And it's a great way to learn the business. It's a great way to get the feel of a sporting event, how the operations runs in. I mean, we can't talk in detail about it, but
I'd love to mention a company I worked with very closely, White Copper Entertainment from Pune, who've been in Pune-based agency, but they've done some great work in terms of holding an IP. You remember they did the Maharashtra Premier League many years ago.
That was one of the first state-based franchise leagues.
They are a very strong agency in terms of handling events. Also social media. There are a lot of social media and PR agencies who've come up and who are specialized sports and digital agencies.
Yeah, Wordswork is one that comes to mind.
Wordswork is a PR agency.
IoT, that's Vivek Setia's company.
Yes, India on Track.
India on Track. They have done a fair bit of good work in the digital space.
Sports Interactive is the biggest.
Sports Interactive is an excellent company.
Meraki is doing a lot of social media content.
And Meraki is handling the digital side for a lot of teams. So again, that also has a bifurcation like the sponsorship side, where you have sponsorship for a player versus sponsorship for a team. You can also do your digital and PR management for an athlete versus a team. And we can break that down into the companies as well.
Great. I think we've captured a lot in this episode, Dhruv. There are a lot of things that we can talk about, and we could have created 2 episodes on this. But this is a gist, like we mentioned, we are happy to take more questions and
help point people in the right direction to these companies. More information on a particular area they want to work in and the right company. So that's been a great chat on this.
Before we wrap, in every episode, we are going to do a business snapshot, where we are going to talk about what aspect of sports business that happened in the last few weeks or a last month, and we are going to give our opinions on that and get our insights on that. This week we are going to talk about a very interesting episode of a podcast that Raj Shamani did. So what was your key takeaway from that Lalit Modi interview that happened recently?
The open league versus the closed league. An open league is a league that has promotion and relegation, like the English Premier League. Teams go down, teams go on top. The closed league is the closed shop franchise system, like the NBA, like the NFL, where you have private franchise owners who own an asset in perpetuity for a franchise fee. You have a closed system where a broadcaster pays a share of money to each team, no promotion, relegation, and it's profitable for every team.
Essentially, also what IPL does is that whether you finish 10th or you finish first,
Yes.
you end up earning the same amount of central pool.
Central pool money. Your prize money obviously differs, but it's profitable.
It's profitable.
Yes.
So that was Dhruv's insight. I had a couple of insights. I had a couple of points that I thought were very, very important to talk about. He mentioned that Indians don't like cricket. They like to watch Indian cricket. I keep reiterating this point a lot, Dhruv, because I've worked on a lot of data about Indian cricket and cricket overall. We don't, everybody says India is a cricket loving country. We are a Indian batting loving country.
We're a cricketer loving country.
We love to follow cricketers. We love to see them bat.
Yes.
We love to switch on the television or watch on a digital platform where Indians are watching.
Yes.
This is data backed information that I'm saying. He was very right in saying that.
So Lalit Modi was ahead of the curve with this.
He absolutely, he knew his numbers. He followed data. I'm sure he knew what worked. So this was a very relevant point. And the last point, which is very important, we can again do a big episode on this. Not television. I want to talk about how important it is to get right owners for
Yes.
a league.
Oh, yeah. True.
It's a huge aspect. I've seen it very closely in Kabaddi. The moment you get good owners to back you in a franchisee-based league, it's a game changer. He mentioned that specifically Shah Rukh Khan coming on as a team owner for the Kolkata team. He thought it was a game changer. We've seen how important he has
Bought
been to
new
promote.
fan bases, as he said, yeah.
So these were two aspects for me which were very important from that chat. I think we've covered that pretty well in our episode, in our segment.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it for this episode, Dhruv. I think we've talked a lot about how the sports ecosystem in India exists. Happy to take more questions. Send in your comments, your thoughts about what you want to see in more episodes. Follow us on YouTube, like our episode, and we'll be happy to come back and do more here.